Okay, I think it's time to get started. To start off, my name is Pam Castercombe. I'm a web analyst with InfoTrust, and today I'll be taking you through some of the enhanced e-commerce reports in Google Analytics, with the goal being that the holiday shopping season is coming up. This is a very important time of the year for retailers. So we'll be focusing on two main topics today. First, we'll talk about how to tag your digital marketing campaigns to make sure that you can track the success of those campaigns in Google Analytics. And then we will go through almost all of the enhanced e-commerce reports in GA, and I can show you how to use those to make the most out of your data. So with today's webinar, I am recording the session, so we'll provide you with the recording as well as a copy of the slides. And at any time you have any questions come up, feel free to submit them via the little question bar. And then at the end, I'll review any questions that have been submitted and answer them. So like I said, here's our agenda. First, we'll talk about custom campaign tagging, and then we'll go over all of the different enhanced e-commerce reports that I have listed out here. So first of all, we'll start kind of very high level with the acquisition reports in Google Analytics. So these reports are entirely focused on helping you understand how users are arriving on your website. So you can analyze your traffic by marketing channel, or more specifically, the traffic source and medium, or via different campaigns that you're running. So in this section, you'll find mostly session-level KPIs, such as sessions, users, bounce rate, and that you'll see broken out by either channel or traffic source or campaign. So the use case for these next slides is going to be, focusing on how do you properly tag your campaigns so that you can understand the performance of your different digital marketing campaigns. Okay, so first we're going to do a breakdown of how the traffic data is presented in Google Analytics. So there's 5 dimensions in total that are going to be able to identify your traffic. And the first one is traffic source. So source basically indicates where the traffic is coming from. So in most cases, your sources are categorized into 4 groups. Direct, meaning that the user typed in your website directly into their browser. There's referral, which is just any other site. Search, being any search engine or a specific campaign. Each traffic source is accompanied by a medium, which indicates how the traffic got to the site. So usually we view our reports with source and medium shown, because with those two things together, we can get a pretty good idea of where the traffic came from. So you might see, for example, Google Organic and Google CPC indicating paid search, or the specific site that someone arrived from that was a referral. So in Google Analytics, GA is automatically assigning the source and medium to all site traffic, but in many cases, if you're running other digital marketing campaigns, it's very helpful to collect additional pieces of information about the content that brought users to your site. So in addition to source and medium, there are 3 more dimensions that we can use to identify this traffic. And we sometimes call these the UTM parameters. So those 3 additional dimensions are campaign, keyword, and content. So campaign is simply an identifier for the marketing campaign that you are running. And when you're doing this custom tagging, campaign is a required field. But the other 2 dimensions you can use, keyword and content, are optional. So keyword, which is also sometimes known as term, is typically used to identify the paid search keyword that was entered by the user. But that being said, if you're running an email campaign or a social media campaign, there's no restrictions on how you can use keywords. So if you would like to use that dimension for something else, for a social media campaign, by all means, it's not going to break anything. That's just kind of the typical out-of-the-box application of how keyword is used is for paid search keywords. The last dimension that you could use is content. And this one, like keyword, you can use however you wish. But the typical applications we see, it is used to either identify like a separate version of a campaign or different versions that went out to different audiences. So for example, if you are sending an email blast and you send one version of an email to your loyalty customers and you send another version of the email to just your regular distribution list, you could use the content dimension to distinguish which version of the email that that person would have viewed. So for some traffic, such as AdWords paid search, these dimensions are going to be populated automatically. But the important thing is that if you are setting up this tracking yourself for an email campaign, social campaign, you will need to set up the custom campaign tracking yourself. So that's the point of why we're going through this. So now you kind of understand why we're doing it. Next, I'll show you how to do it. This slide just has a visual of kind of maybe one way you might structure your campaign. So you might have a campaign that's running across different traffic sources, different mediums, and so you could have one campaign name that's consistent across all, and then the source and medium would be set however to reflect however that person arrived. So between source, medium, and campaign, you should get a pretty good indication of where a user arrived from, and then the term and content dimensions can just provide more granularity, more detail about how that person actually arrived. So how do you actually set this up? So you customize your campaign tagging by adding the source, medium, and campaign URL, or excuse me, campaign dimensions to your destination URL. So when they're in the URL, you'll see that each of them is preceded by UTM underscore, hence we sometimes call them UTM parameters. So when you're creating your URLs, you'll see source becomes UTM underscore source, etc. And then keyword, just to point this one out, becomes UTM underscore term. So as an example, if I were directing people to my site, example.com, to tag how those users arrived at example.com, I would use a question mark and then populate my different parameters. So I have UTM underscore Facebook, ampersand, UTM underscore medium is social, and then UTM campaign as fall promotion. So what's happening here is someone is clicking on this link, they are going to this URL, and Google Analytics is reading these values from the URL and using them to populate the data that you're seeing in the report. So whatever you put in your URL, that's what you're going to see in GA. So you could really, the sky's the limit for what you want, how you want to set these up. But I would say do it in a way that it's going to make sense to the business user of your data. So you don't have to do this by hand. There are a couple different tools that you can use. This first one is the Chrome extension, which is very handy. Click this and it would open up a window and you'd be able to just type in the value that you want to set for source, medium, etc. Or you could use the second link, which is a website with a URL builder And this is what it looks like. So you give it your destination URL, fill in the values of the parameters, and then it will put in the question mark, the ampersand, and you'll just copy and paste that URL wherever your campaign is being distributed. So one last thing I want to touch on when we're talking about this is the best practices. So custom campaign tagging is appropriate when you are tracking inbound traffic to your site. So these are links that live somewhere else, whether it's a Facebook post, an email you sent out, and that's how someone is arriving at the site. You do not want to use this kind of tagging for links that are already on your website. That'll cause you problems with your GA tracking. So very important, this is only for inbound off-site links. And with that, the second point here is, if you're going to do this, you must set values of source, medium, and campaign. Those three are required. The second best practice I want to touch on, when you're setting these up, you have a lot of flexibility, but we do recommend checking in with how your default channel definitions are set up, and then selecting the values of your parameters appropriately. So we'll see these in the next slide, but the default channel definitions determine how your traffic is categorized into the various channels. And so you'll see that in your channels report. So those definitions are built largely on the values of these UTM parameters. And I'll show you an example in the next two slides of kind of what I mean there. The next couple ones I want to touch on kind of a little more high level. So one thing you do need to keep in mind is that all parameters should use the same case sensitivity, otherwise your reports are going to get segmented. This one I believe I already touched on. UTM parameters should not be used on internal links. And then finally, we always recommend documenting what you've used in the past so that you can have that for reference and also maintain consistency. So back to the channel definitions. So these are the rules that determine which sessions flow into each of the different channels. So you can view these on the view settings on the admin screen. So by default, all of them will show up like they are here, where it says system defined, but you do have the option to change these, to fit your business. So here I have a link. If you are using the default or the system defined definition, here's a list of rules that Google is using to categorize your traffic. So in the example we were talking about before, let's say you're tagging a Facebook campaign and you want to make sure that your sessions from that campaign flow into your social channel. Well, here you can see the rule that would cause that to happen. So as long as the medium is social network, social media, all of these different values here, then having set your UTM medium parameter this way, you'll see that session flow into the social channel in your channels report. You can, obviously you have flexibility to change these channel definitions, but we certainly recommend tagging your campaigns to meet the definitions instead of the other way around. And then finally, if you've set up tagging in a way that it meets none of these rules, then you're going to see your sessions flow into an other channel. Okay, so now that we've talked all about why you want to tag your campaign, how to do so, now we'll talk about how to actually see the data in Google Analytics that's reporting on it. So a couple things I want to call out here. First of all, you'll see in the upper right-hand corner of all of my slides that have a screenshot of GA. But up here in the upper right-hand corner, I've noted how to navigate to that report. So when you're looking in the left pane menu, this report that I'm showing right here can be found under Acquisition, and then in there, All Traffic, and then within All Traffic, this is the Channels report, so that you can easily navigate to these reports if you're following along. A couple other things, just high level about how GA is set up. Up here at the top, we have alternate metric sets that you can view in your report. So by default, you're seeing the summary metrics, but there are many other sets of metrics that you can choose to view in this report. So when we are looking at the e-commerce reports later, it might make sense to toggle over and view the e-commerce metrics. Another thing to point out, in many of your reports, you can also change the primary dimension. So that's what we see right here, the default channel grouping in this case. For this report, you have a couple other options. You have source medium, source individually, medium individually, or there's this little other drop down of a few other dimensions you can bring in. So you do have a little more flexibility. And then finally, a feature I use all the time is this last red box to bring in an additional secondary dimension. So that will just allow you to overlay another piece of information on this report. So with those GA basics sort of out of the way, here we have the channels report. So here's where we're seeing all of the relevant metrics based on the marketing channel, and we just talked about how these channels get assigned. So now we can see all of the sessions, kind of our top level metrics like bounce rate, conversion rate, transactions, and revenue that's attributed to each of these different channels. For additional granularity, you can also view this data based on source medium. So whereas Google Organic would have flowed into the organic search channel, now we can break out Google Organic versus Bing Organic versus Yahoo Organic, for example. So in this case, we're a little more in the details where we can view the session level metrics. This is a report where I very often add a secondary dimension. Usually I add campaign, but you could certainly add keyword or content, depending on your purposes. And then the final acquisition report I want to highlight today is the campaigns report. So this report is based on the value of the UTM campaign parameter. So this report is helpful if you have campaigns that you're running across various platforms. So if you have a default promotion running across email, Facebook, Pinterest, etc., and all of that's flowing to the same campaign name, you'd be able to see that all aggregated in this report. Okay, so at this time we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to head over to the e-commerce report. Okay, so the e-commerce reports live in the section in GA called the conversions report. So the conversions report, I would say the shining star of this section is e-commerce, but there are other reports that can be found in this section. So these reports are all focused on how often people are completing behaviors that are important to your business. So we have goals, e-commerce, multi-channel funnels, and attribution. We'll be focusing on the e-commerce report. So we'll be finding our order level data, our session level KPIs, things like transactions, revenue, average order value, and So we're actually going to walk through these reports kind of backwards down the purchase path. So we'll first kind of start at the very end. So the first talk about completed orders. So we'll look at the e-commerce overview, where you can see the number of orders that have been completed, the total revenue, and we'll also at this stage look at the sales performance report, showing kind of more detailed completed order data. From there, we'll take a step back and we'll look at the reports concerning user behavior that preceded a purchase. So we'll take a look at the 2 funnel reports that are available. From there, we will look at the different product level reports. So we can view the revenue attributed to individual products or entire product categories or brands. And then finally, we'll look at the reports that are focused on your marketing efforts. So these could be internal promotions or coupons that are being used at checkout. So the first report, again, kind of starting at the very end with the completed purchases, is the Enhanced eCommerce Overview. So this report is great because it's sort of a pre-built dashboard for you. So if you need a 2-second answer on what does my revenue look like for the last 30 days, this is the quickest way to just pop in and see my revenue was 130,000, for example. So this is your very high-level data, but you can get to it very quickly. The sales performance report provides you some more detail when it comes to your completed orders. So here we again can see the total revenue for the period, but now we can see it broken out by individual transactions. So we have kind of revenue, tax, shipping, how many products were purchased, and then what's really cool, if you're following along, you can click in to any of these rows for the different transaction IDs, and you'll be able to see the data, or you can see the products that were actually included in that transaction. So now that we have our answers, kind of our basic answers of how many orders were placed, what's my total revenue, let's talk about the user behavior that would have preceded the purchase. So we have 2 funnel reports that are available. This first one is called the Checkout Behavior Overview. So this report is a view into how users are completing your checkout process. So you, when you're tagging your checkout process, you're usually looking for people completing kind of different key steps. So in this case, when they got to the checkout page, did they sign in so that they could progress to the next page? And then once they're on the shipping page, did they select a shipping option? Did they click continue so that they can start entering an address? So with the tagging we have set up, we can see exactly how many sessions reached each of these different thresholds. We can see the abandonment rate that occurs. And then finally, we can see how many of those sessions actually completed a transaction and exited the funnel. So one cool thing you can do with these reports is that it's very easy to create a segment to learn more about people who are, maybe falling out of the funnel. So what you would do is you would click into the report, and it would prompt you to create an e-commerce segment. So if I go back to the last slide, if I were to click on this red arrow right here for account signed in drop-off, that would prompt me to create a segment for just those 521 people that fell out of my funnel after step 1. So you can do that for any of these red arrows, or if you want to click into the blue bars, that will allow you to set up an e-commerce segment as well. So when you do that, it will bring up a dialog box that looks like this. You'll say create segment, and then you can overlay that segment onto any of your GA reports. So maybe you want to see what marketing channels are driving people who are likely to abandon, or maybe what products are in the carts of the people who are abandoning. Using this type of segment is going to allow you to answer those types of questions. Another cool thing you can do with these funnel reports, you can get a more detailed view other than the high-level funnel by scrolling down and using the table that's shown below the funnel report. So by default, it's showing you user type, which is new or returning users, but you have the option to change and view a different dimension. So you can see the progression through the funnel of different users based on the breakdown of the dimension you've selected. So not surprisingly, we see, we tend to see that people who are returning visitors have higher completion rates or conversion rates for the funnel. So you can use this to maybe dive a little deeper and look at specific marketing campaigns or different device types. So maybe this is a way if you suspect you're having a problem on mobile. You could view this report by device category and confirm if the mobile checkout is causing issues for people. So this is a cool feature that I don't know gets used very often, so that's why I wanted to point it out to you today. There is one other funnel report that's available to you in GA. This one is called the Shopping Behavior Overview. This one is a higher level view of what users are doing on the site. So to contrast that with the last funnel, that one was kind of very focused on the checkout process, where this one is focused on the session as a whole in completing milestones, but less specific milestones, I would say. So with this view of the purchase path, the first step of the funnel just includes everyone. And then from there, users progress through the funnel by taking steps that you would need to take to complete a purchase. So this first one is sessions with product view. So in that case, viewing any product details page on the site would allow you to be counted in this second step of the funnel. From there, the third step is adding any product to cart. The way this funnel is set up is this session level metric funnel. So as long as you perform these actions at least once, you will be reflected in this funnel. And so it progresses in that way from add to cart to initiating the checkout process, and then finally how many sessions actually completed a transaction. Just like the other funnel report, you can create your e-commerce segments here by clicking into the funnel. And you can, if you scroll down, view the funnel broken out by new versus returning or countries or another dimension. Next, we're going to talk about the product performance report. So in this report, you can actually see the breakdown of revenue at the product level. So by default, it's going to show you the product's name. But if you look up here above, you can change the primary dimension. So you could view it at the product SKU level, or you can view it by product category or product brand. So you have kind of some nice aggregation tools here if you're populating this data on your website. So here we can obviously see the product revenue. You can also see how many times it's been purchased, the average price, average quantity, etc., and then also some of these shopping behavior ratios. Another handy way to use this same product performance report is to select the other metric set. So here I've toggled it from the summary metrics to the shopping behavior metric. So here we can see the, again, product level data, but this time it reflects that shopping behavior funnel we just reviewed. So at the individual product level, I can see how many times this specific product was viewed on a list page, how many times it was viewed as a product detail page, how many times it was added to cart and also removed from cart, how many times it was in a basket that initiated checkout, and then finally how many unique purchases of the product. So this sort of granularity really lets you see at the product level what the purchase path looks like. So you can see not only completed purchases, but you can get a sense of abandonment if you see a high add to cart number and a very low product checkout number, for example. Just like I discussed on the last slide, you can very easily toggle this over to view the shopping behavior metrics on the category or the brand level to understand kind of the success of your products in either of those aggregations. The next report I want to go over is the product list performance. So this one is also very focused on products, but this time they've been aggregated in the way that makes sense to your website. And so they've been aggregated into what we call product lists. So the usual kind of way we recommend setting a product list is based on different list pages. So if you have a main list page with all of your t-shirts, for example, I would populate my list page here as t-shirts, and then we can see kind of the success of that category across all of these different metrics. So what we typically see is product lists to reflect different pages. It also makes sense to include search results as its own list. And then finally, if you have any cross-sell carousels or other places where people are viewing your product, you can break those down into separate lists also. So for each of these lists, we can see again how many times products were viewed, what the clicks and the click-through rate were. So in this case, we can see the click-through rate for search results is about 2.5 times what the average click-through rate is. So again, intuitively that makes sense because someone searching is probably a more focused user than someone who's just browsing. And then, continuing down the purchase path, we can see, their add to cart, checkout, and purchase behavior, and the revenue that's associated with that collection of products. So now that we've talked about kind of the holistic purchase path, the last couple of reports I want to touch on are focused on different marketing efforts. So this first one is the internal promotion report. So if you have tagged your homepage, for example, with different promotions, or if you have a banner that persists across all pages alerting customers to a sale with a coupon code that you're using, or anything like that, we can tag those types of content as internal promotion. So when we set up this sort of tagging, it allows us to understand how often those different pieces of content are being seen, as indicated here by internal promotion views, how often they're being clicked, the calculated click-through rate, and then any transactions and revenue that are associated with clicks on those promotions. So how this gets calculated is that the revenue and transactions you see here are credited back to the last promotion that was clicked. So if you had a person who clicked 5 different promotions on your site and then ultimately spent $100, you would see all $100 credited to that last promotion they clicked before they completed the purchase. And then the last marketing report that I want to touch on today is the order coupon report. So if your site has the option for users to submit a coupon or a promo code while completing their checkout, you can track those coupon codes in Google Analytics. So this report's showing the name or the value of the coupon that was submitted by the user. And then we can see the revenue from sessions where that coupon code was used. So here it looks like we have a lot of customer courtesy with the coupon code. And we can see there were 5 transactions that were completed that used that order level coupon. So the distinction here is if this would be used if the coupon applied to the entire order. Because it's possible that you might have a coupon that only applies to specific products. I didn't show it here, but there is a separate product level coupon report that's available in Google Analytics that would show you, looks very similar to this, but it would report on the product level coupon used instead of this order level code. And so that report would just be called the product coupon report. All right, so that wraps up our run through of custom campaign tagging as well as the e-commerce reports that you'll need to understand your holiday shopping during